When belief and truth collide in a world full of danger, the story of the Diamond of Uma will take you to face the unexpected. Part 2. What do you know about my brother's journey to pong craving? Jetta asked succinctly, his voice carrying a sharp edge. As far as I know, that's all there is to it, Rappin replied, his tone steady and deliberate. To be honest, I didn't pay much attention. It seemed like nonsense to me. Mr. Chot Prachakorn went on that trip, claiming he was searching for Fra Uma's treasure. Fra Uma's treasure. The three of them gasped in unison, their eyes widening. Before Rappin could elaborate, Chayin interjected urgently, his voice tinged with alarm. What do you mean? We don't understand. Please explain in more detail. The experienced hunter shrugged slightly, his expression calm and composed, a stark contrast to the growing impatience among his guests. The implicated story, he began. If I were to recount it, it would sound more like a legend. But since you've come this far to find me, your determination deserves my respect. I'll tell you what I know, but first, I need a promise from you. What kind of promise? Mr. Ying Darin asked, her gaze fixed intently on him, her voice steady. That you won't laugh or interrupt me, Rappin said, his tone serious. The story is unusual. We give you our word, Mr. Rappin, Chetta assured him firmly. We will listen with respect, Chayin added swiftly, his tone earnest. Rappin nodded and paused for a long moment before continuing. The term comfort Fra Uma's treasure first came to my attention about 10 years ago. At the time, I was a young hunter in training, tracking gorals in the Thung Fly and Gam region. The story was told to me by a local hunter named Nan Fry. Tragically, he passed away within a year of sharing it with me. It all started with the wound from the bull's horn. The night Nan Fry told me the story, we were sitting together in a tent, waiting for tigers to come down to feast on an elephant carcass. Past the long hours before sunrise, we spoke of everything under the stars. We were certain the 8-cubit-long tiger we had been tracking for weeks wouldn't appear that night. It was an inauspicious time, and eerie stillness hung in the air. Till time, I told Nan Fry about a poison balm I had seen as a child during World War II. Look, he suddenly interrupted, his voice lowering conspiratorially. I'll tell you a story that's stranger than anything you've told me. Do you want to hear it? I nodded, intrigued. Nan Fry began to spin a tale about a lost city hidden deep within the jungle. It reminded me of the mythical city of Lapli. He spoke of a place far away, in the heart of an impenetrable forest, a city of ancient prosperity from a time before history was written. It was said to hold mysterious treasures, gems, gold, and riches beyond imagination, lost now to the wild savagery of the land. Though it sounded like a legend, his words captivated me, burning into my memory like a vivid dream. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, Nan Fry asked, Have you ever heard of Mount Shiva? It lies to the northwest of the Tenasserim mountain range. I laughed. I'd never heard of such a mountain. And besides, there's no record of a place like that on any map. He smiled knowingly, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. You're from the modern generation, what would you know? He teased. Mount Shiva is where Fra Uma's treasures are hidden. They say it holds everything: gems, silver, gold, even jars filled with untold wealth. But it's not just about finding it. If you aren't lucky enough, if you don't have the merit, you'll never see it. Spirits of the forest, the demons, and the ghosts of the mountains will keep it hidden. Sacred place. Where did you get this children's fable, uncle? I asked with a smirk. It's not exactly a fable, he replied, his tone serious. A wandering Burmese monk told me about it. He said there's a vast city in the valley behind Mount Shiva. The people there are a branch of the tribe that once ruled Suvarnabhumi. They guard the secrets of Fra Uma's great treasures, preserving them for eternity. No matter how the world changes, that city remains frozen in time just as it was thousands of years ago. After finishing his story, Nan Fry laughed and pulled a betel nut from his lewa bag to chew. I laughed too, dismissing the tale as nothing more than folklore. That night we parted ways. Nan Fry eventually met his end, as I had mentioned earlier, from the wound inflicted by a bull's horn. I thought I had forgotten his tale of Chumfet Fra Uma and the lost city of Long Samran, hidden behind Mount Shiva. But 5 years later, that story came rushing back to me. I was in a place called Suarong village, known for its arid land and desolation. The villagers were suffering from famine, with little food or water to sustain them. By chance, I had passed through the area while tracking a herd of elephants with massive tusks. But there I fell gravely ill, just as the villagers were in the grip of their misery. As I lay weak and feverish, a Burmese traveler arrived in the village, accompanied by his half-Burmese, half-Dawei companion. Like me, he too succumbed to illness. His name was Nguyen, he told me, and he came from Malamian. Nguyen stayed in the village for a week, recovering slowly from his ailment. Though our interaction was brief, we formed a bond. When it was time for him to leave, he bid me farewell with a smile. Goodbye, my friend, he said, waving as he set out on his journey. If the world is truly round, or if one of us meets death before we cross paths again, I will become the richest man in the world. I will never forget you." I laughed and watched Ni Win as he stumbled into the dense jungle, heading west. Questions filled my mind. Where was he going? What could drive a man to abandon his life and venture into the heart of an untouched wilderness? Was he in his right mind? A week passed, and my condition improved somewhat. One evening, I sat outside my small camp nestled in the dense forest. The dim sun hovered over the horizon, casting golden rays over the dark mountains ahead. As the day gave way to twilight, my eyes caught a movement across the stream, about 300 meters away. On the slope of a low hill, I saw a figure crawling on the ground. It staggered upright but collapsed again after just a few steps. Even from that distance, it was clear the person was in distress. I called for my Karen servant to assist. Moments later, the figure was brought to my camp. Can you guess who it was? The hunter paused in his story, glancing at his audience. "Ni Win, the Burmese trekker Umar," said the guest softly. The listeners leaned forward, captivated. The hunter nodded gravely. Yes, it was Ni Win, or what was left of him. His face was jaundiced, his eyes sunken and swollen, his flesh wasted away. He was little more than dry, yellowed skin stretched over brittle bones. His once dark hair was streaked with gray. "Water!" He croaked hoarsely, barely audible. His lips were cracked and peeling, his blackened tongue protruding as if it might fall apart with each agonizing movement. I brought a jug of water to his lips, and he drank greedily, finishing it in moments. When he finally spoke, his words were delirious, a rambling mix of fevered mumbling about the Shiva Mountains, treasures, and the unforgiving jungle. I did my best to care for him, knowing full well that his chances were slim. By midnight, his fever had abated slightly. He seemed calmer, and I dared to hope he might survive. But as the night deepened, his breathing became irregular, his body restless. Near dawn, I awoke to find Ni Win sitting upright in a peculiar posture, his eyes fixed on the jungle and the dark silhouette of the mountains beyond. "It's there!" he exclaimed suddenly, pointing a skeletal finger toward the horizon. His voice, weak yet charged with desperation, cut through the stillness. "But I'll never reach it again. No one ever will." His words trailed off, and his hand fell to his side. For a moment he seemed to summon the last fragments of his strength. His wild eyes turned to me, filled with a strange clarity. "Dear friend," he whispered hoarsely. "Is it you? Are my eyes deceiving me?" "It's me, Ni Win," I said, gently steadying him. "Relax. You're safe now. Go back to sleep." "I'll be resting soon," he muttered. His lips twitched in a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed his resignation. "A rest that will never end." "I know it, Rabindra." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "You've been good to me. Before I die, I want to give you something, a repayment for your kindness. It's a map. Maybe you'll succeed where I failed. It will guide you through the forest of the dead, to what lies beyond." With trembling hands, he reached into his tattered hiking shirt and pulled out a small object, a pouch made of deer hide, tied with a strip of leather. His fingers fumbled clumsily, his strength failing. I can't," he whispered, his hands frozen in mid-motion. "Corrected," Ni Win rasped, thrusting the leather pouch toward me with trembling hands. I carefully unwrapped the pouch, revealing a thin, worn piece of ancient leather. The faded Burmese script inscribed upon it was nearly indecipherable. Beneath the leather was another piece of paper, its edges brittle with age. "That paper," Ni Win began hoarsely, "contains the translation of the inscription. It took me years to decode. I had to decipher it word by word with painstaking effort." His labored breaths filled the silence before he continued, his voice weakening with every word. "Listen closely, Rabindra. My ancestor, Meng Mahanaratha, was a high-ranking officer under King Bayanal. He fled the capital of Hanthawaddy and became the first Burmese to set foot in this jungle. The inscriptions on the leather were written by his hand while he was dying on a mysterious mountain range where no human had ever tread." Ni Win's fever-bright eyes met mine, his voice trembling with urgency. "He died alone on that mountain, leaving only this map and his words. His slaves found his body and brought the map back to Malamine. It has been passed down in my family ever since. For generations, no one cared to decipher its meaning. No one but me." He paused, his face clouded with regret. "But this map, it's cursed. It has brought disaster to me. And though I am dying, I believe someone will one day succeed where I failed. I am entrusting this treasure to you, Rabindra. Keep it safe. Tell no one." I nodded, overcome by the gravity of his words. Moments later, Ni Win's body seized with spasms, his suffering unbearable. Within the hour, he passed away, his gaunt face finally at peace. I buried him deep in the forest, placing a large stone over his grave to protect it from scavengers. Then I left that haunted place. Rabindra Prewin paused in his tale to take a slow sip of brandy. The room was silent, the air thick with intrigue. Mr. Ying Daran, her striking eyes narrowed in thought, turned to glance at her brother and the others. Chet bit his lip, leaning forward with interest. Chayin and Amphoon, the director of the Thai Wildlife Company, poured brandy for Rabindra, who downed it in one gulp. It's quite a story, the director remarked, his voice tinged with disbelief. And what about the documents? Amar? Chetha asked quietly, his curiosity clear. Yes, what do they mean? Chayin chimed in, his enthusiasm breaking the summer air. Rabindra paused, seemingly reluctant to answer. Finally, he said, since you're so interested, I'll tell you. I've never disclosed this matter to anyone before except once. Years ago, I showed the documents to a drunken Burmese opium dealer who translated them for me. He forgot the translation by the next day. He shifted in his chair, his expression unreadable. As for the original leather map, it's safe at my resting place, my trap station at Non Nam Hien, along with Ni Win's translation. However, I carry a Thai translation with me, folded in an envelope with a map sketch. As he spoke, Rabindra reached into his back pocket, pulling out a large envelope. Inside was a neatly folded document, which he handed to Mar. Chetha. Before Chetha could open it, his sister Ying Daran snatched it from his hands. The others leaned closer as she unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. I Meng Mahanaratha, and dying now from hunger and sickness in a small cave to the north of the southernmost breast of the Twin Mountains. I name it then Fra Uma. I write this message in the year 2120 B using a bird's beak bone to carve these words into leather, my own blood as ink. If my slave finds this, he must take it back to Malamian. Deliver it to my friend, though his name is now illegible, and urge him to bring this message to the wise king of Hanthawadi. This map marks the path to a great treasure. But the journey is perilous. If the king's army does not heed the warnings, they will be destroyed in the vast, cool forests and mountains, lands haunted by spirits and dark magic. However, if they can endure, they will reach the Emerald City, a place of unimaginable wealth. The king who conquers it will be the richest ruler in the world. As Yin Daran finished reading, the room was enveloped in silence. No one spoke, but their expressions told of a shared awe and a dawning fear. The words carried the weight of history, danger, and the tantalizing allure of untold riches. Rabindra leaned back, his face shadowed with both satisfaction and foreboding. Now you know, he murmured. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. But remember Ni Win's warning, this map brought him only ruin. No, my boss, Nanan replied, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. We're looking for something far more valuable than gems. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself. More valuable than gems. What could that be? Nanan glanced around nervously, as though afraid the trees themselves might overhear. Then, leaning closer, he whispered, the treasures of the Numa. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral. The treasures of the Numa. Are you serious? He nodded, his face grim. Kanchat believes in the stories, even if most dismiss them as legend. He's convinced there's something out there beyond the wilderness, past the breast of the mountain. Something worth risking everything for. And you? I asked, watching him closely. Do you believe in it? Nanan hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know what I believe, my boss. But I know the jungle doesn't give up its secrets easily. If there is treasure, it's guarded by more than just nature. The witch's curse, the ghosts, the magic, these aren't just stories told by old men around a fire. I've seen things. Strange things. Before I could press him further, Kanchat called out from the edge of the camp. Nanan, time to go. Nanan straightened, casting one last glance at me. Take care, my boss, he said quietly. The jungle doesn't favor those who wander too far into its heart. Rabindra Prawan paused again, his expression shadowed as though he were lost in the memory of that conversation. The room, filled with the faint flicker of the firelight, was deathly silent. What happened to Kanchat? Paul. LT. Call. Jayan asked, breaking the tension. Rabindra's lips twitched into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. What happens to anyone who underestimates the jungle? He vanished, along with his men. Weeks later, I found their camp, or what was left of it. Torn tents, scattered supplies, no sign of Kanchat or Naninch, just silence. And the unmistakable sense that they disturbed something best left alone. Mr. Ying Daran, who had been silent for most of the tale, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. A convenient ending, she said, her voice laced with skepticism. No witnesses, no evidence. Just another ghost story. Rabindra chuckled, his green beard catching the light. Believe what you will, Cunning Daran. I'm not here to convince you, only to share what I know. If you think it's merely a story, then let it remain one. She frowned, her sharp gaze narrowing. And what if I don't? His smile widened, but it carried a hint of warning. Then you'll have to follow the trail yourself. But be careful what you seek, Cunning. The jungle doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier, the weight of his words settling over the group like a shroud. Mr. Chester cleared his throat, attempting to lighten the mood. Well, whether it's true or not, it's certainly a tale worth remembering. Paul. LT. Call. Jayan nodded, though his expression was thoughtful. And the treasures of the Numa, do you believe they're real? Rabindra rose from his seat, his movements slow and deliberate. Does it matter what I believe? The jungle holds its secrets tightly, and it's up to each person to decide whether the risk is worth the reward. With that, he gathered his things, leaving the room in a silence that buzzed with unspoken questions. The room was heavy with silence as Rabindra's words trailed off, leaving the group to grapple with the tension in the air. Each person's face reflected a mix of disbelief, curiosity, and unease. Finally, Amar. Ying Daran broke the silence, her voice sharp and skeptical as ever. Afraid of what, Mr. Rabindra? You seem to be implying something, but you're not giving us anything concrete to consider. Rabindra turned his gaze to her, his expression unreadable. Afraid of the unknown, Kani. Afraid that Kanchat and his men may have ventured into something far more perilous than they could imagine. Something none of us can truly comprehend. Paul. LT. Call. Kayan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Do you have any proof that Kanchat actually followed the instructions in your letter? Or that this Shiva mountain even exists? Everything you've told us so far sounds like folklore mixed with conjecture. Rabindra's lips curved into a faint smile. Proof. Number only the stories whispered by those who have dared to venture into the wilderness and returned with their minds broken or not at all. He paused, his voice lowering. But I will say this. The map from Mangmahanuratha, written in blood on parchment, is no fabrication. It exists. And it has guided others before, to their glory or their doom. Amar. Testa, who had remained quiet for most of the conversation, finally spoke, his voice hesitant. And what became of Kanchat? Did you ever hear from him or his group again? Rabindra's smile faded, replaced by a solemn expression. No. Not a word. Not a sign. The jungle swallowed them whole, as it has done to countless others. The room fell silent again, the weight of Rabindra's tale pressing down on everyone. Amar. Ying Daran stood abruptly, shaking her head in frustration. Enough of this nonsense. If Kanchat chose to risk his life chasing after fairy tales, that's on him. But don't expect us to believe in ghost stories and cursed maps. Rabindra watched her leave the room, his expression calm and unchanging. Belief is a choice, Kani. Whether you believe or not, the jungle remains what it is, a place of beauty and terror, hiding truths we may never understand. Paul. LT. Call. Jayan sighed and stood as well. We'll be leaving for the field early tomorrow. Let's put this conversation aside and focus on what's real. As the others began to disperse, Amar. Testa lingered, his eyes fixed on Rabindra. If there's even a chance that my brother is out there, lost or worse, I need to know. Can you take me to this elephant pit and beyond? Rabindra studied Chesta for a long moment, then nodded. It is not a journey for the faint of heart. If you truly wish to go, prepare yourself. The jungle shows no mercy. Chesta's jaw tightened, determination gleaming in his eyes. I'll be ready. After refilling the brandy for the hunter, who had shared his story, and pouring some for himself, he took a slow sip before speaking in a calm, resolute voice. Miss Rapin, I've made up my mind. I will follow my younger brother until I find him, or until I know for certain that he is dead. Once you confirm that he's heading for the Shiva Mountains, I will follow him there. But there's one issue. I need a guide I can trust. Honestly, I can't think of anyone more suited than you. The room fell silent once more. All eyes shifted toward the hunter. He shifted uncomfortably, then offered a modest smile. First, I must thank you for the honor you've shown me. I also want to say that despite the hardships of my life, I still cherish it. It's not an easy life, but I manage. I still have my mother, who's elderly and depends on me. I'm her only support. The others exchanged glances, the weight of his words sinking into her, speaking as though this journey is a death march. Kayan murmured softly. Or to put it another way, the idea of going to the Shiva Mountains seems like the most reckless and foolish thing anyone could do, MRW. Ying Daran added with a mocking smile, clearly trying to provoke him. Rapin Prewin responded without a flicker of emotion, his voice steady. It's true what they say. The blood of a great hunter like myself runs thick. But that doesn't mean I'm willing to throw my life away on something as futile as that. Noi. Paul. LT. Kayan spoke sharply, his gaze a warning. Please let him speak. She smiled, unfazed, before casually picking up a magazine from the table and flipping through it. Mr. Teta, pushing forward, spoke with conviction. I know the dangers. The Shiva Mountains are treacherous. But I trust in something else, the strength of our resolve. We believe that with your skill and experience we can make it through. Our lives are in your hands. If death comes, we will face it together. The only thing standing in our way is you. We're prepared to cover all expenses, Chayan added, no matter how high they go. We'll pay whatever fee you require. We're not asking for miracles, just for you to give us some hope. Mr. Amphan, the quiet company director who had been listening intently, reached out to pat the hunter's arm, his voice measured but firm. Your Highness's group will take care of everything, the costs, the fees, whatever you need. We simply ask that you guide us to the Shiva Mountains. What happens after that is out of our hands. If he finds Kunchai Anacha, it will be by fate, not by any terms of our arrangement. But this is a good opportunity for you to consider. Your mother shouldn't worry. You can secure a guarantee for her well-being, either a lump sum or monthly payments, whatever you choose. Kunchai will see to it. Isn't that right? He turned to Amar. Teta, who nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. No problem at all. Let Kun Rappan make his demands. We accept them. But know this, Kun Rappan won't be the only one risking his life. We're all in this together. Our fates are bound. It's like we're in the same boat, Chayan added with a smile. Everyone watched as Rappan's impassive expression softened, and a rare smile spread across his face. For the first time, his eyes shone with approval. He glanced around the room, clearly satisfied with the determination of those who had placed their trust in him. You've convinced me, he said quietly. We leave in 3 days. Prepare yourselves and be ready for what lies ahead. This journey won't be easy, but it will be ours to face together. A sense of resolve settled over the group as they all nodded in agreement. The path to the Shiva Mountains was set, and whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them united. I bow to your manhood and sportsmanship. I admit that I've never seen anyone as brave, determined, and open-minded as you two, especially city dwellers like you, surrounded by comforts and conveniences. Now, let's move on from this issue. Suppose I agree to guide you and we manage to reach our destination alive. And on top of that, we even find this so-called Fra Uma's diamond cave. Has the capitalist who hired me considered how we will handle what we find? Amar, Teta responded without hesitation. With the honor of a man, I promise that whatever fortune we encounter on this journey, we will divide it into 3 equal parts, 1 for me, 1 for Chayan who risks his life alongside us, and 1 for you, our partner in life and death, the hunter. Does that sound fair to you? The hunter stood, bowing his head to Cheta. This is a generous offer. I never expected to receive such a thing. As a poor, insignificant hunter, I've never had anyone offer me this kind of fairness before. Though, does this mean you agree? Chayan asked eagerly. Indeed, it's a crucial and important task in my life. Please give me a little time to think it over. I'll have an answer for you within 3 days before I return to my trap station at Non Nam Heen. I'll be staying here for another 2 or 3 days, with the exception of Amar. Darren, who was reading a book indifferently. All the men in the room stood up. Mr. Amphan, the company director, eagerly grabbed the hunter's arm. Then this evening I, the young master, Mr. Chayan, and cunning Darren would be honored to host and invite you to dinner here. Will you join us? I apologize, but I have prior plans this evening to meet some old friends, local hunters. It's rare for us to gather and socialize, and I act as their leader. I rely on them, so I can't break this appointment. Then when will you give us a chance? Teta asked quickly, his cheerful face filled with hope. Well, we'll be staying here with Mr. Amphan for now. To be honest, we're here to wait for your decision. Can you spare some time tomorrow at noon? Yes, Rappan replied simply, before standing up, putting on his leopard skin hat, and heading toward the door. As he left, the group followed him with their eyes until his tall figure disappeared from view. He walked toward the area beneath Mr. Amphan's animal quarantine station. Bravo! Looks like there's still hope. What do you think, Mr. Amphan? Chayan asked, turning to the host for his opinion. Yes, I think so too. We should have a definite answer from him by noon tomorrow, Mr. Amphan replied. This journey, all our lives are in his hands, Amar. Teta said softly, his gaze fixed on Rappan as he walked toward his jeep. Even though I'm confident in his abilities, I'd like to hear your thoughts again, Amphan. Can we trust our future to him? From what I know, young master, I can only guarantee his honesty and gentlemanliness, Mr. Amphan replied with a sigh. Amar. Teta let out a soft breath, muttering to himself, those 2 qualities alone are enough for me. It's strange seeing him, talking to him, and being in this forest. It reminds me of the white hunters in Africa. I never thought we would have a civilized hunter like him in our own forest, someone who can speak and understand like a well-educated person. But I'm not sure about him, this brave forest hunter, Mar. Darren said with a light laugh. First time I met him, just a few words were enough for me to sense that he's arrogant and cold-blooded. He then turned to Mr. Amphan. At the very least, you should know something about his history. If you can share it with us, it would be helpful. His past, his background. Amphan smiled politely and replied calmly, Rappan Prewan is a former military cadet from Germany. He was originally a police lieutenant colonel assigned to the border patrol unit. However, due to political reasons and frequent changes in leadership, he was dismissed. With no skills beyond shooting and hiking, he turned to hunting. In fact, his ancestors were also skilled in this profession, a lineage he may not have even known about or intended to follow. He can speak every dialect of the jungle languages and navigate the wilderness with the same ease as walking down Ratchadamnon Road. The director's words left the room in stunned silence. "Oh my gosh! Oh my!" "MRW!" Ying Darin exclaimed, her face a mix of disbelief and astonishment. This brave hunter, with a face as rugged as a bandit, was once a German military cadet and a police lieutenant colonel in the border patrol. "Yes, that's him," Amphan replied calmly. The young woman looked as though she might faint. She leaned her head out of the window again just in time to catch a glimpse of Rappin's jeep driving away from Mr. Amphan's animal quarantine station. Whether by coincidence or fate, Rappin looked up at that moment and their eyes met. He raised his hand slightly, touching the brim of his hunting hat in a small salute. Darin bit her lip, her gaze lingering on him until he disappeared from sight. Unbelievable. No wonder he talks so slyly, yet acts so innocently. "Big brother, you need to change the guide. If you stick with him, you'll definitely clash with Noi, and the journey will end before it even begins." She half laughed, half grumbled, but her brother remained unbothered. He turned to Amphan, his expression full of astonishment. "You're lucky. I never imagined our hunter would be so well educated. This feels like a dream. I feel so much more at ease now. I can almost say that I have no worries left. From here on out, it's all about karma, whether we face good or bad luck. It's all in the cards." "I had a feeling from the start," Chayin said. "Just look at the way he speaks. Mr. Rappin is no ordinary local hunter. He's well educated, no doubt about it. But Noi, why do you keep glaring at him when all our lives are going to be in his hands?" "I don't know. I just don't like him at all. He talks too much and it's starting to get on my nerves." "The beautiful Amar," Darin replied, her voice stern and irritated. The group from Amar Testa stayed in Mr. Amphan's guest house as honored guests. The guest house was a large, half-timbered building designed in a modern style. It was nestled at the back of the property, surrounded by meticulously arranged bird cages and lush plants, creating a serene atmosphere. The long-standing, respectful relationship between Mr. Amphan's family and the Thai Wildlife Company made him an excellent host, and he welcomed his guests with genuine warmth. The next day, just before noon, while everyone was gathered in the living room chatting, with Mr. Amphan, the house owner, also present, Rappin Praewin appeared exactly at the appointed time. Today the hunter looked more presentable than the day before, when he had been dressed in a dirty hiking outfit. His thick green beard was shaved clean, revealing his copper-colored face. Everyone greeted him, except for MRW. Ying Darin, who merely glanced at him without showing much reaction. Though she turned her head to bow in a traditional gesture, her attention seemed elsewhere. Today, she wore a polo shirt and tight stretch pants in the color of Tibuia flowers, brilliantly beautiful, but it seemed of no use. As Freen Fry Jai Kiu, as she called him, showed no excitement or interest. This was unlike the ordinary men she had encountered many times before. "Thornsilla doesn't eat at all, this hunter," she grumbled to herself, glaring at him without reason. The person being glared at probably didn't notice, as he was busy conversing with others. Everyone had lunch together and chatted, except for the beautiful MRW. Ying Darin, who remained quiet. Rappin spoke about his life in the forest, but no one mentioned the important issue left unresolved from yesterday. After the meal, Mr. Amphan invited everyone to continue the conversation in the living room. Cigarettes were smoked and brandy was poured. "Have you made a decision about the important matter we discussed yesterday?" "Mr. Chetha asked with a bright voice. "We firmly believe that you won't disappoint us," Chayint added, staring at Rappin. Rappin Praewin took a deep drag from his cigarette, exhaled slowly through his mouth and nose, and gazed at the large stuffed bull's head hanging on the wall. "There should be no problem, Mr. Rappin," the director of Thai Wildlife Company said with a chuckle, supporting the group from Bangkok. "I will ask again." Rappin's voice was low, rough, and resonant. "Are you certain you want to risk your life?" "There's no doubt, Mr. Rappin," Chayin replied firmly. "Then I'll make my offer." "Go ahead. We're listening." Term 1, your group will cover all expenses for this trip. Term 2, any profits from valuable finds on the trip, I will take 1/3. Term 3, you will pay me 200,000 baht in advance. Term 4, before this trip, you will agree to a contract in case of my death or incapacitation, guaranteeing that you will pay my mother 3,000 baht per month until her death. How does that sound? Is my offer too much? Without hesitation, Amar Chetha smiled and extended his hand for Rappin to shake. "Okay, I accept your offer without bargaining or complaints. I will serve you honestly and sincerely until you decide to dismiss me or the job is finished. Otherwise, until the very end," Rappin added. Chayin smiled broadly and shook the hunter's hand with enthusiasm. Mr. Amphan, excited, congratulated both sides. "MRW." Ying Darin merely smiled, the corners of her mouth twitching as she observed the hunter quietly. "All right," Rappin said, his coarse smile spreading as he looked at everyone. "Since I've agreed to guide you, I will tell you the truth. I never thought we'd return to this mountain of death. What happened to Mang Mahanaratha almost 400 years ago, what happened to Nevin, his descendant, 5 years ago, and what will happen to Kunchai Anacha, Kunchai Chesta's younger brother. These events will soon affect us as well." His words sent a chill through the room. Silence settled in Shamar. Chetha remained calm, his serious expression unchanged. Paul. LT. Jaehyun blinked, his breath heavy, feeling a sudden unease. MRW. Ying Daran pursed her lips, her mind racing. Even though Mr. Amphan wasn't directly involved in the journey, his face turned pale. The room was silent for a moment before MRW. Ying Daran wore it broke it with a sharp, high-pitched laugh. Her voice, clear and mocking, echoed in the space. I don't understand, Hunter. He deliberately emphasized the word Hunter, not his name, as if to challenge him. You agreed to be hired as our guide, so why did you say something that suppresses or destroys our spirit like this? Rapin Praewin didn't look at her, instead he fixed his gaze on Umar. Chetha. His lips parted, and his voice was calm but firm. I have already told you, I speak the truth, and this is my own feeling. The young woman walked gracefully from the sideboard, her steps deliberate as she stopped in front of him, almost as if forcing him to meet her gaze. Her tone was sharp as she spoke. Suppose you already knew we were going to die. You are the guide, so why did you agree? For a moment, their eyes locked, her sharp gaze meeting his, as if testing each other's resolve. Rapin's lips curled into a faint smile before he replied. I have 2 reasons for agreeing to this. She raised her eyebrows, eager for his answer. What are they? First, I am poor. The wages and conditions I requested are satisfactory to me. To risk my life this time may seem too high for some, but to me it's reasonable. Second, this journey involves many lives that are worth more than mine. Kanchai Chetha and Major Jaehyun are both taking the risk, so why shouldn't someone like me? His words left her speechless. Jaehyun, sensing the tension, cleared his throat and turned to Umar. Chetha, I think we should head back to Bangkok tomorrow, prepare everything and come back here with a lawyer to make the contract official. Will you be able to prepare for the journey? Chetha nodded. That sounds right. We've agreed on this. We should leave as soon as possible. Turning to Chomfran, he added, I will arrange everything to comply with your demands. Now let's discuss the details of the journey. The 3 men discussed for nearly an hour, and Chomfran briefly outlined the travel plan. Who will be on your side? Rapin asked at one point, his tone sharp. As far as I can see, it'll be me Jaehyun, and, I mean Daran. Rapin's face grew serious as he quickly interjected. What reason do you have to prevent me from going? MRW. Ying Daran's voice came back immediately, shrill and laced with displeasure. I don't need to explain this at all. Everyone, including the lady herself, should understand that this trip is not a picnic. Her tone matched his, sharp and uncompromising. Daran stood up swiftly, her face flushed with anger. Don't forget that you're our employee, she snapped. Yes, I'm an employee, Rapin replied, his voice steady. An employee who must guide and protect the lives of all the employers on this journey. But I have the right to refuse a burden that's too much, like unnecessarily protecting the life of another woman. Daran's face turned bright red, her fists clenched. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes blazing. Then, without warning, she broke eye contact, a laugh escaping her lips. She walked over to a rack of rifles, and within moments, a .30-30 lever-action revolver was in her hand. She calmly grabbed a box of ammunition from a nearby glass cabinet, opened it slowly, and loaded the bullets one by one. Her eyes never left Rapin as she did so, the intensity of the moment palpable. Then, without a word, she turned toward the window. With a swift motion, she pulled the lever, her finger on the trigger. The sharp, explosive sound of gunfire shattered the air. Bang! 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 Each shot caused the room to shake, and with each pull of the trigger, a cluster of raw kapok from the kapok tree outside, about 40 meters away, blew off the branches. With the final shot, she aimed to sever the branch itself, and the entire cluster of kapok tumbled to the ground with a crash. Daran, her chest heaving with anger, glared at Rapin as she asked, How is it? Will I be a burden to you, making you worry too much? Not to mention that with a rifle like this barrel size, it's nothing for me. I've handled a .458 African or a .600 Nitro Express before, and good thing you shaved your beard today. Otherwise, at 100 meters I'd trim it for you with a rifle bullet that wouldn't even irritate your skin. Everyone in the room was taken aback, especially Mr. Amphan Falicorn, who had no idea the beautiful young lady could shoot with such skill. The others, who knew her brother and male companions, weren't as shocked. But the sheer force of her anger was what caught everyone off guard. Rapin, however, remained unruffled. His calm demeanor never wavered as he replied coolly, Your ladyship's accuracy with a rifle doesn't make my burden any lighter. I apologize if my refusal upset you. Daran stood before him, her gun still in hand. She looked up at him with a mixture of amusement and defiance. Too bad I'm a woman, she said softly but with an edge, poking the barrel of the rifle into his arm, a mocking smile on her lips. If I were a man, I'd challenge you to a fight after being insulted like this. Rapin's reply was matter-of-fact, his expression unchanged. That's why you're a woman, my lady. Let's talk rationally, Daran said with a forced laugh, her tone trying to mask the anger. That's right, I'm a woman. But whatever a skilled hunter like you who's praised by everyone can do, I can do too. So why are you restricting my rights? Why not let me travel? It's my rightful decision. My brother hired you, so don't worry about protecting me. Just guide me honestly. I can take care of my own safety. Rapin paid her no mind, his indifference almost like that of an adult dismissing a child's teasing. The younger man next to him, sensing the tension, leaned toward Amar, Chetha, and spoke quietly. I need to talk to you privately for a moment, he said. They both stood up and walked out onto the balcony. Chetha followed him, his face strained. I know what you want to talk about, Chetha said with a sigh. Jayan and I are on the same page. We've tried to stop her countless times, but Darin is stubborn. She's always been like this. If she decides something, there's no changing her mind. I understand how dangerous this trip is, but we're brothers, and there's nothing we can do. It's all we have. The younger man frowned deeply, shaking his head. But if something were to happen to you or Chayin, is it fair to bring cunning Darin into that danger? Chetha looked troubled. There's no way I can stop her. No one can. If we cancel the trip, I won't accept it. Please allow her to come with us. At least she can be of some help. She's a doctor, her skills could be useful. It might seem like a burden on one hand, but it'll provide us with safety on the other. The younger man sighed, looking pained. Then it's up to you. I forbade her for her own good. Reluctantly, Amar. Chetha invited him back into the room. As soon as he stepped back inside, Rapin froze. Darin was aiming her gun at something. As he entered, the sight of the barrel pointed directly at his chest made his heart skip a beat. She chuckled lowly, the sound harsh as she swung the muzzle to make it seem like she was aiming past his head. Rapin sighed, muttering under his breath, this lady is truly wicked. She's much more dangerous than the black leopard that escaped yesterday. He took his seat again, and Darin lowered the gun to her side, her expression still filled with defiance. How is it? Will you allow me to come along now, Hunter? Rapin gave in, his voice calm but firm. Okay. The young woman laughed triumphantly, her voice full of victory. See, I told you. You're just an employee. You have to follow the orders of your employer. He raised an eyebrow, his words laced with quiet wisdom. But sometimes the employer must obey the employee, especially if that employee is the rudder of the ship. Otherwise, the ship will sink and the employer will drown. The three men in the room shared a rare moment of laughter at Rapin's dry words. But Darin shot him a glare, muttering softly under her breath. I'm a doctor. Don't you think you'll need me on this trip? That's all. Rapin didn't argue with her anymore. Instead, he shifted the conversation back to the logistics of the upcoming journey, ready to focus on the task ahead. Thank you for listening to the end. If you like it, please like, follow, and share with your friends to have fun together. See you in the next episode.